I'll go ahead and start. Okay.
Okay. Yay. All right. So, okay. I guess before we get started, there is, these are just real short conversations. We talk about, so even though it's recording, I'll make an official start and then we'll get going. And these are just really informal. They're kind of just fun astrology talk talk shop. And so I'll ask you a little bit about how you got started. I thought we could focus on the connection that you make between herbs, like herbalism, and astrology, because I think that's a really unique angle that you have. Is there anything that you're really passionate about right now, or that you really want to share?
Um, I think the herbs is really my focus right now. I mean, like I said, I'm doing this moon workshop on Saturday, and I'm going to be incorporating herbs into that. Just lunar plants kind of thing. So I think that's pretty much my main focus. I'm also like my two things right now that I'm teaching about and talking about are the herbs and also um, the archaeology, astrological archaeology. So like kind of, going back in your past and researching old transits and then seeing how those match up with current transits. And I'm going to be teaching a class with under Christina's umbrella in the fall. So that could also be something. Yeah.
Very cool. Great. Okay. Well, we'll go ahead and get started.
Okay.
Um, and so I always hang on one second. I've been in session since 9 o'clock this morning, so I am like,
I know. Yeah. Wow.
um,
I totally. Today seems like it's such a
it's Mercury
I've
Neptune.
got all kinds of stuff going on too. It's like
Uh-huh.
I'll explain in just a second. Um, and are you getting Delilah? Okay. Yeah, I'm right now. We're in the process of trying to close on a house here in New Mexico, and so while we're waiting for that, we've been waiting for like a month. We've been staying at our friend's house, who owns an antique store, and we're staying in the apartment in the back of his antique store. So I've got his dog, our dog in the backyard, him and his partner up front doing stuff. So there's a lot of kind of chaotic Gemini energy happening today. So I'm trying to ground it all, but I just wanted to let you know what was happening.
Okay. I love it. I love it. All right.
Okay.
So we'll go ahead and get started. I'm going to elevate myself just one second just to get a better angle.
Okay. Yeah,
right.
my lighting, it's like I don't have my own space. So the lighting, the sound, I have like not a lot of control over the external. So it's kind of,
It looks really good. You look great. You look very New Mexico, actually. Okay. All right. So here I go. Hello, everyone, and welcome to NCGR Conversations. This is Rachel Lang, the Outreach Director for NCGR, and I am here with Fern of Wise Stars Apothecary. Hi, Fern. Welcome.
Hi.
And Fern, so I always like to start these conversations with finding out what brought you into astrology. How did you get started?
Sure. So I'm almost 52 right now. And when I was in my early 20s, I had a friend who was in college at the art school in Southern California. And she said, you've got to get a reading with this astrologer. And so I was totally intrigued. I got a reading and I was blown away. I was like, this is so fascinating. And I started, accessing every book and resource I possibly could and did a lot of self-study for a year or two. And then very serendipitously, I met an older woman who was an astrologer, an herbalist, a flower essence practitioner, and a medium. And we became the best of friends. We had a lot of Neptune contacts. and she mentored me basically until she died a few years ago, and was just an incredible teacher for me.
Mm. So do you incorporate all of those things into your astrological practice? The mediumship, the herbalism, the, all of the tools that are in your toolbox?
I do, and it's really interesting for me because when we first started working together, it was the astrology that really grabbed me. Even I'm a Virgo and I've always been into gardening and plants, but I never really thought about incorporating the herbs. But my mentor always told me, the herbs are going to be part of your path. And in the last 5 or 10 years, that's been something that's become so much more part of my practice. And I'm really passionate about the integration of the two.
Mm. So do you actually how do you work with the herbs? Do you make tinctures? Do you blend? Do you like create custom blends? How do you best
Yeah,
relate with them?
so I make tinctures, I make topicals. For a while, I had my own natural product business, where I blended flower essences and herbs and essential oils into different topical products. Right now, because we've been traveling for the last year or so, I'm not offering the custom made blends. I'm actually trying to source an herb company that will make custom blends for me to provide to clients. But right now, I'm just when I do sessions with people and we do intake and look at their chart, talk to them about what's happening, and then come up with sort of a protocol for them that and then give them resources about where they can access those herbs and plants.
So you're using them in like a remediation in your astrological work? Is that correct?
Yeah, and I studied Vedic astrology for a while, and I was also, a bodywork practitioner who was trained in some Ayurvedic um, techniques. And I was really intrigued by, the ancient roots of how astrology and herbs and plants and gemstones was all so integrated in Ayurveda. And I wanted to find a tradition that was sort of rooted in my own ancestry. I didn't want to culturally appropriate with the Ayurveda. And so I started to study the Western herbs. And about a year ago, I received my advanced training in Western herbal studies from the California School of Herbal Studies. So
Mm. How does that now I know that there are astrological correspondences for each of the herbs. Is that kind of like the basis of your work, or how do you merge the two in addition to remediation?
yeah, there absolutely is. There's a very rich history of integration of herbs and astrology. Culpeper is a name that's known, by a lot of people as sort of our main book source for those connections. But a lot of amazing astro herbalists right now who are coming out right now are using what they know about the astrology of the planets to find new correspondences. And this is really relevant, particularly because Culpeper was using a lot of herbs that were native to England. And so, here in the States or in other countries, we have to use our understanding, both intuitive and kind of, technical, to come up with new correspondences between the planets and the signs and the plants. So some of it's intuitive, some of it's based on just knowing, the personalities of the planets and how they meet with the personalities of the plant. So
That is so fascinating. I mean, I incorporate herbs a lot in my ritual practices, in working with magic and things like that. And I love that idea of like expanding our repertoire of astrological correspondences. Um, Now, do you bring some like so for when we're working with herbs, or when you're working with herbs that don't have those astrological correspondences, what is your process for like, do you feel into it? Is it in like, do you build an intuitive relationship with the herbs? Like, how do you work? I'm so curious.
Yeah, absolutely. So definitely intuition, I mean, that's such a root of a lot of the work that we do as astrologers and healers. But also just in terms of like studying them and relating to them. So if you look at, for example, marshmallow is a plant that is associated, Culpeper associated it more with Venus, but a lot of more modern herbalists, myself included, really see it related to the moon. Because the plant itself is kind of big and watery looking. The flowers, they come in white, red, and pink, but they have this very lunar kind of look to them. And the plant itself is known to help fluids and moisture come into the body. So if you're having a sort of a dry constitution or issues with dryness, the marshmallow really helps to moisten, all of the membranes of the body. So it's a natural fit with the properties of the moon. And there's just so many layers to that. I really see that the plants and the herbs are the physical embodiment of the planet, that, they're a way for us to actually touch and physically relate to those sort of energetics of the cosmos.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree with that assessment, and with that, working with them myself, not in the same way that you do, but like, it definitely feels like there's a strong relationship there. So hang on one second, let me think. I have like so many questions. This is the problem with having a Gemini moon, is that I get like question congestion. Like, which way do I want to go? And it's
I
moon
can
conjunct
relate.
Jupiter too.
Yeah, I've got Mars and Sagittarius in my third house, so I have like a sort of a very assertive curiosity.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. That's great. Yeah. So what are some of, like, so you work with clients in addition to working on your own, like working with tinctures and things like that. Do you have any examples or any stories that you want to share of times when you have been blown away by some of the relationships with the way that herbs have been effective in working with your clients?
Yeah, well, this would be more of a flower essence story, just because this is a more recent story. But I had a client who actually, I did a reading with her and suggested some flower essences that seemed like they were applicable to her chart and some of the transits that she was having. And she wrote me and said, I really appreciate these flower essence recommendations, and I'm just wondering, if you have any suggestions for my daughter. And she described a situation with her daughter. And I recommended a flower essence that was good for just feeling more confident in social situations. And she said, "Oh, that's so amazing, because I just bought that plant. I just bought that flower." And I see synchronicities happen like that a lot, where I'll suggest a flower or plant and people will have just noticed it, or just grown, put it in their garden, or just related to it in some way.
Yeah. So I'm sure everybody wants to know, what is that plant?
You know what? What was that plant? I think it was Mimulus. Yeah, that seemed that, but I'm having some. I'm not entirely sure, because I know Mimulus is not a plant that is commonly grown, and so it's yeah. That may be something you want to edit out.
I will edit that out. I will edit that out.
Stuckness. Let me think if I can remember another recent story of some kind of plant synchronicity. Yeah, nothing. I'm sorry, nothing's coming to me right now.
That's okay. We'll go to another topic, and I will edit this out. In fact, I'm going to stop. That way I know I'll stop recording, and
Okay.
now I'm going to start again. Okay, there we go.
Okay.
Um, so, um, so, uh, now do you sorry, again,
That's okay.
I have like so many questions, and also I'm like, I'm a psychic medium, so I'm like, I'm kind of, have to close it down. Don't worry, I'll edit all of this, but, uh, so let's talk about healing, because you mentioned a number of different things like Ayurveda and definitely working with herbs and your tradition in all the different things that you studied. It sounds like you really approach astrology from the perspective of healing and helping someone with working through some of their big picture life themes. And you're also an evolutionary astrologer, is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So, how do you see astrology as a tool to facilitate the healing process?
Yeah. So, I mean, I see so many potentials and realities of astrology being a tool for that, just in terms of giving people some kind of affirmation and perspective on, whatever kind of um, issues or healing crises they're going through at the time. A personal example is that I had a chronic illness for 14 years that was extremely painful, very debilitating, and tried. And part of the reason that I integrate, so many different healing tools into my practice is because I literally went out and learned those tools as a way of trying to heal myself. Um, and ultimately, how I ended up, um, sort of curing my issue was with surgery. So I really went through this kind of 360-degree philosophical transformation of integrating allopathic medicine into all of my alternative medicine tools. But astrology was so powerful for me through this whole journey, and just um, giving me some kind of archetypal answers that helped me derive meaning into what I was going through. So the date that I actually had the surgery that cured my condition, I was having a nodal return, and I would think it was Mars was right up next to my North Node. So I've got a lot of the 12th house emphasis, and the 6th house was really being activated during that time. And I've just found that to be really helpful when I'm working with clients and they're going through some kind of healing crisis or some kind of health journey, to give them some milestones and benchmarks of transits and kind of explain it from an archetypal level and help provide some sense of meaning to what they're going through.
Mm-hmm. And are you working, which forecasting tools do you use? Do you use progressions? Do you use transits, directions?
Yeah. I tend it really depends on the client, but I always look at progressions. And then if there's and transits, of course, transits, progressions. And if there's nothing that really flashes, I'll take a look at solar arcs as well. And sometimes I'll look at all three. It really depends on what kind of intuitive hit I get from the person and just what I think they might be most helpful for them.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I look at a chart and it's like the story is just like, I got it, right? And it's just this incredible download. And sometimes I've got to like research and kind of dig deep and look around the corners and stuff. So
Yeah, so it sounds like you've really come up with a way of just being fluid within your practice, gathering all these tools and resources that you've collected along the way, and being able to just kind of move within them.
yeah, I mean, I always envied artists who had that really foundational, they knew exactly how to draw something from life, exactly. And then they, from there, from that foundation, they would innovate and, with more improv. And in some ways, I feel like I've been able to do that with astrology. I've got my technical basics down, and now I feel much more comfortable in just kind of bringing in whatever, comes to me with all the tools I've gathered.
Mm. And you teach, do you teach, wait, I know that you teach and you have some offerings coming up, but when you're working with students, do you help them to sort of gather, like use all of their tools and resources and create a framework within that as well?
That is what I really love to do. I love to try to share the basics and the foundation, and then guide through people through kind of tapping into their own tool bag and utilizing those in an intuitive way.
Mm. What which classes, you have some classes that are coming up. Do you want to talk about this for a second?
Sure, yeah. So I do an ongoing class. It's called Be Your Own Astrologer, that I do twice a year, and that's kind of the basics of astrology, the planet signs houses. And then the one that I have coming up is just a 2-hour workshop, and that's on Saturday, and it's all focused on the moon. And I'll be talking about some kind of core herbs of the moon, and the moon in individual natal chart, but also the moon by transit, and the goddesses of the moon, and all things moon.
Mm. So can we get just a little preview? Can you name like one or two herbs that relate to the moon? You talked about marshmallow. Is there anything else?
Yeah, there's so many moon plants. Um, and yeah, so one of my favorite is mugwort, and mugwort, the Latin name for mugwort is Artemisia. And so Artemisia is named after Artemis, the goddess of the moon. And I love just the magic of that, going back hundreds and hundreds of years, that there was that relationship between Artemis and the moon and this plant. And you can see mugwort, if one way that if you're in nature and you're trying to identify it, that that it's true mugwort, is if you look at the underside of the leaf, and it's silver. And so that too in itself, just the underside, the hidden part of the leaf, which is so lunar, that private inward kind of nature of the moon, and then the fact that it's got that silver color, which is also associated with the moon.
I love that. Mugwort is one of my favorites. I use it in so many different rituals and so many different applications. So it's very powerful.
Yes,
Um,
it's one of the witches' plants, and
uh,
Artemis is the witches' goddess. So there really is, it's about dreams and,
yeah.
vision and all those great things.
Mhm. And just so we can have some balance, because that my Libra, what about the sun? What herbs, can you name a couple of herbs that are associated with the sun?
Yeah, so the sun in astrology, the sun is ruled by Leo. We all know that. And Leo in medical astrology rules the heart. So there are a number of herbs. One that I love so much, have a really profound relationship with, is motherwort. And motherwort is a plant that is, it's in the mint family. And the Latin name for that is Leonidas cardiaca, which means lion-hearted. And so it is a plant that some herbalists associate with the moon, but it's also got a relationship with the sun, because it kind of, when you have too much heat in your heart and your heart flutters, and you get anxious and short of breath, motherwort calms the heart. It protects it. So it's got this very kind of lion, mother protective lion feeling, but it balances that too much sun. So it goes both. Another one is calendula. So most people know calendula. It grows almost everywhere, and it's got those bright, sunny flowers. And it's very good for moving the lymph system and just bring movement and warmth into the body. So.
That's great. Those are, I mean, those are both, I think, well, all herbs have their own voice and their own power and their own energy. And I love the way that you're able to capture that and to work with them within astrology. Yeah, do you have anything else you want to share? Any other plants that are, what plant is speaking to you the most right now?
Right now, let's see. So I'm in an interesting place because I was born and raised in Northern California, and we're in the process of moving to New Mexico. And so, we spend a lot of time taking our dogs on walks out in nature and seeing all these new plants. And it at home in California, when I take walks, it's like I'm meeting all my friends, so how are you doing today? All the plants that I know. And here it's like all these exciting kind of new strangers. But there are some overlaps. There are plants that, that I know in California that I'm recognizing here. And one that's growing right outside in the yard is plantain. And plantain is a plant that I associate with the sign of Taurus. It's really soothing for the throat, and it just has so many incredible healing properties. The seeds of it are what make psyllium husk. So it's a plant that kind of gets things moving. It helps that kind of stuck Taurus energy that can, be stubborn and like, I don't want to move. It can help that kind of give it some flow and kind of get things moving more.
I love it. That's great. Well, we will put your information on the hang on one second. I'm gonna stop. I wanted to I had another, I was gonna, let me wrap this up, but let me answer that. Let me respond to your question better. Now, plantain, are you talking, is that like, that's not plantain, the tropical fruit, correct? It's a different type of plantain?
Yes, it's a different type of there's yeah, that's a good question. There's plantain, the fruit, like the bananas, and then there's plantain, the plant that I'm trying to think of the Latin name. It's Gallium. I can't remember the second part, but it's many people think of it as a weed. It grows everywhere. If you saw it, you'd probably recognize it. So. Yeah.
I find that like a lot of times when I take walks, I'm picking things like dandelions are growing everywhere around me now. Yes. And so I'm like picking dandelion roots. And do you do that on your walks when you meet these new friends?
Sometimes. I mean, I really try I sometimes have to restrain myself because you don't know sometimes. I mean, dandelions, yes. Dandelions, there's so many and they just kind of replicate. The more you pick on, the seeds fly and they grow. And dandelion, by the way, is a plant of Jupiter. So it's really good for the liver, right? You probably know that. Yes. And but some plants, because I don't know, how how rare they are in the area. I try to be responsible in my foraging, just because you can decimate the population of a plant in a particular area if it's not super abundant. So I try to be aware of that. Yeah.
That's a good thing. I only pick dandelions, by the way, because they're plentiful and like you said, and people can exactly. So they're not. I don't harm any other plants in the making of my dandelion tea. This is so fun. I just love your perspective. That I love all the different ways that you approach this topic, and I love your story and how your own healing process really led you to this work. So thank you so much for having this conversation with me. And I will post your information under this video. So if anyone wants to find you, they can find you. But just for fun, why don't you tell others where they can find you and where they can register for your class?
Sure. Thank you, Rachel. And then thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate you taking the time to have this conversation. It's really a pleasure. So I'm at ystarsastrology.com, and I'm on Instagram also as ystarsastrology. And the class is both on my website and on the Instagram.
Excellent. Well, it's been so great talking to you. And I hope this is one of many conversations that we'll have in the future.
Me too. Thank you so much, Rachel.
All right. Thanks.
Bye.
Okay.